Level 1. The container. It starts in a repurposed shipping container in the middle of a desert, air conditioning unit rattling against heat that doesn't care about your equipment ratings. 2 monitors. One shows a grainy thermal feed, white-hot shapes moving against a cold gray landscape 8,000 miles away. The other shows a checklist you've read so many times you could recite it in your sleep. You're 24 years old. You went through flight school for planes you'll never sit inside, learned aerodynamics for a bird you'll only ever fly with a joystick that feels more like a video game controller than anything that should carry a payload capable of ending a life. Your instructor, a burned-out major with 12 years in the program, tells you the first rule on day 1. The feed is not a movie. Whatever moves on that screen used to be somebody's plan for tomorrow. You nod. You don't understand it yet. You will. Your first solo shift is 11 hours. You watch a compound that does nothing for 11 hours. Goats, laundry on a line, child running across a dirt courtyard 3 separate times. Nothing happens. You go home at 2 a.m., eat cereal standing at your kitchen counter, and lie awake replaying the child running across the courtyard, wondering if you'll see him again tomorrow, wondering why that thought unsettles you more than anything else about the job so far. Level 2. The trigger. 6 months in, you take your first shot. It's nothing like training. Training has clean simulations, clear rules of engagement already resolved before the exercise begins. This is a live target, confirmed through 3 layers of intelligence you're not fully briefed on. Cleared by a chain of command sitting in rooms you've never seen. Reduced finally to a single decision that happens inside your own hand. You pull the trigger. There's a half-second delay. The actual physical distance the signal has to travel, satellite to drone to warhead. It feels like the longest half-second of your life. Then the thermal feed blooms white, then goes dark with smoke, then clears. Your supervisor claps you on the shoulder. Clean hit. Good work. You say thank you, because that's the correct response, the trained response, and you drive home that night obeying every traffic law with unusual precision, as if being a careful driver might balance some ledger you don't have words for yet. You don't sleep. You keep replaying the half-second delay. You start to understand what your instructor meant. 6 months too late to unknow it. Level 3. The distance. The distance is the part nobody prepares you for. Not the physical 8,000 miles, but the psychological kind. The way you can end someone's life at 9 a.m. and be picking up groceries by 6 p.m. Standing in a fluorescent-lit aisle debating between 2 brands of pasta sauce like the person you just watched die was a video game character and not somebody's father. You start therapy, mandatory now after your 3rd confirmed engagement. The therapist uses a term you've never heard before. Moral injury. Not PTSD exactly, something adjacent to it. The specific wound of doing something that violates your own sense of who you are, even when every superior tells you it was justified, necessary, clean. You don't tell her about the goats. You don't tell her about the child running across the courtyard, who you now recognize with a sick, sinking certainty was standing near the compound the day you fired. You tell yourself it's fine. You tell yourself the collateral damage assessment cleared the strike. You believe the collateral damage assessment. The way you used to believe things before this job taught you that believing and knowing are not the same activity. You request a transfer to a different sector. It's granted. It doesn't help. Level 4. The upgrade. The military invests in you. New facility, climate-controlled, ergonomic chairs, a wall of monitors instead of 2. Resolution so high you can count individual roof tiles on a building from a drone flying at 30,000 feet. You're promoted. Sensor operator to pilot in command. You now make the final call, not just execute someone else's. The weight of that shift takes months to fully land. You spend the first few weeks feeling like an imposter pressed into a role too large for you. Then the feeling fades, which frightens you more than the feeling itself did. Your new commanding officer, a colonel who's run this program since its earliest, grainier days, tells you something during your first briefing that you write down afterward, alone in your car, so you don't forget it. You're going to get good at this. Getting good at this is the part that should scare you. You don't fully understand him yet. The God complex is still 6 levels away, but something in his tone tells you he's speaking from experience he'd rather not have. Level 5. The pattern of life. You learn a term that will define the next 4 years of your career. Pattern of life. Before any strike is authorized, you watch a target for days, sometimes weeks, mapping their routine, their family, the mundane texture of an entire human existence, until you know more about a stranger's daily habits than you know about your own neighbor's. You know when he prays. You know which of his children walks him to the market on Tuesdays. You know he takes his tea black, no sugar, at exactly 6:40 every morning on a small balcony that faces east. This intimacy is the job's cruelest architecture. They train you to know someone completely, precisely, so the moment of ending them can be surgical, clean, minimized in collateral cost. Nobody in the program calls this intimacy. They call it intelligence gathering. But you know what it actually is. Alone in the container at 3 a.m., watching a man drink his morning tea, and some nights you find yourself hoping, against every professional instinct you've been trained to suppress, that today isn't the day. Some days, it is the day. You watch the balcony empty out through the smoke. You go home. You sleep 4 hours. You come back the next morning and start learning somebody new. Level 6. The precision. Your kill count, a number you've stopped saying out loud even to yourself, earns you a reputation. Command starts requesting you specifically for the sensitive operations, the ones where the margin for error is measured in single digits of civilian risk tolerance, where the mission briefing includes phrases like high-value target and time-sensitive window, delivered with the flat urgency of men who've stopped feeling the weight of what those phrases actually authorize. You become excellent at this. Your hand doesn't shake anymore. The half-second delay between trigger and impact no longer feels like the longest half-second of your life. It feels like nothing, a gap you've trained your nervous system to simply not register. You realize driving home one night that you can no longer remember what it felt like the first time. Not the details. You remember those with disturbing clarity, but the feeling itself, the moral vertigo, the traffic law precision born of guilt. It's gone. In its place is something closer to competence. And competence, you're starting to understand, is not the same thing as peace. It's just quieter. Level 7. The room. You're moved to a new facility. The one from the recruitment posters. The one that looks more like a corporate trading floor than a military installation. Glass walls, a dozen pilots working in parallel, each running their own theater, their own war, invisible to the pilot, sitting 6 feet away, running an entirely different one. You have an office now. A parking spot with your name on it. A performance review process that measures your engagements the way other jobs measure quarterly sales figures. Efficiency, precision, collateral minimization scored on a rubric that, on paper, reads like it belongs to an entirely different industry. A journalist requests an interview for a piece on the psychological toll of remote warfare. Command declines on your behalf. You're relieved, and then unsettled by your own relief. Because somewhere underneath the competence, underneath the quiet, there's still a person who knows exactly what he'd say if anyone actually asked, and knows exactly why nobody in this building wants to hear it. Level 8. The God complex. You stop calling targets in your own head, even though you'd never admit this to anyone. You start calling them the day's work, a phrase that lets you hold the entire operation at exactly the emotional distance required to keep doing it well. The Colonel's warning from Level 4 finally lands, 4 years too late to matter. You have gotten good at this, and being good at it is exactly as terrifying as he said it would be. You feel something in the moments before a strike that you don't have a comfortable name for. Not pleasure, nothing that crude, but a kind of total control. A God's eye clarity, watching a life unfold in real time, knowing you hold the singular authority to end it or let it continue. You catch yourself once, hesitating a half-second longer than necessary before a clean shot. Not out of doubt, but because some small, cold part of you wanted to feel the weight of the decision a moment longer, the way a man might linger over a choice specifically because he can. You report this to no one. You're not sure there's a word for what you'd even be reporting. Level 9. The mistake. It happens on a Tuesday during a routine engagement window you've run 100 times before. The intelligence is wrong, not your fault, a downstream error in a chain you have no visibility into. And the compound you strike, cleared as a weapons cache, turns out to be a family home. Wrong address, adjacent building, a targeting error measured in meters that costs, on the other end of that half-second delay, 7 lives, 3 of them children. The internal review clears you. The error belongs to intelligence, not execution. A distinction that means everything on paper and nothing at all in the container at 3 a.m. Replaying the thermal feed frame by frame. Looking for the moment you should have known. Should have paused. Should have been the last check in a system that failed everyone downstream of your trigger finger. You take mandatory leave. You don't take the therapy seriously this time, because you've learned what the therapist can and can't actually help you carry. You start drinking in a way you don't examine too closely. You go back to work 6 weeks later because the alternative, sitting at home with the frame-by-frame replay running uninterrupted, is worse than the job itself. Level 10. The Ghost. You've been doing this for 9 years now. Ghost Battalion, the unofficial name the program earned somewhere along the way, because that's what you've all become. Men and women who end lives from a climate-controlled room and go home to backyard barbecues, completely invisible to the wars they're fighting, completely invisible to the people whose entire understanding of combat still involves boots on actual ground. You train the new pilots now. You give them a version of the Colonel's old warning, softened just enough to still be usable advice instead of a confession. You're going to get good at this. Pace yourself. You don't tell them about the balcony, the tea, the boy running across the courtyard 9 years ago whose face you can still summon perfectly, whose fate you never actually learned, who exists in your memory permanently mid-stride, running towards something you'll never know the ending of. You sit in the climate-controlled suite on your last shift before retirement. High-definition monitors showing a target's final ordinary morning in perfect, intimate clarity. And you understand finally, completely, what your first instructor meant on day 1, in the shipping container, in the desert heat, a lifetime ago. The feed was never a movie. It's been somebody's entire life, every single time, watched close enough to know it completely, ended by a hand that never once had to leave the room. You pull the trigger one last time. The half-second delay comes and goes, the way it always does, the way it will keep happening in your memory long after you've hung up the headset for good.